The Autoline Supplier Symposium is brought to you by our signature sponsor, Ford Motor Company, and also by Bridgestone, Continental, Denso, and the MEDC. Here now is your host, John McElroy.
Welcome to day 2 of the Autoline Supplier Symposium, the 5th annual Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the floor of the 2017 Detroit Auto Show. We're in this magnificent Ford display that's just chock full of all kinds of video screens. You can't see it here, but there's a virtual reality display over there with a long line that people want to experience. All kinds of new cars on the floor. Great place for us to be. Starting off today's show, I've got Greg Hamel. He is the Director of Business Strategy and Indirect Purchasing at the Ford Motor Company. And Greg, you got to tell those of our viewers who do not know what indirect purchasing is, what's that mean?
Indirect purchasing, John, is non-production purchasing. So for a layman, it's everything that's not a car part.
So all the tooling, especially that goes into making the cars.
It's a broad range: advertising, healthcare, F&T, transportation. It's an interesting business.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it. Everything that's not the car parts, but that's got to still be a huge part of Ford's purchasing buy.
It's $23 billion annually, and we have about 5 times as many indirect suppliers as we do direct suppliers.
Oh, that I did not know. And $23 billion, that's bigger than most corporations, just in your buy there.
Yes.
You've started a new program called PACE. Now, within the supplier community, there are the PACE Awards, organized by Automotive News. But my belief is you're talking about something totally different.
This is Partnership for a Cleaner Environment.
And that's what PACE is.
PACE, and it's really part of Ford's Going Further approach. And what it has to do with expanding Ford's learnings on the environment to our supply chain.
So what is it?
It's a program whereby Ford has collected all of our best practices at our manufacturing facilities, saving electricity, water, solid waste, and air emissions. We've collected all those great ideas, and now we're sharing them with our supplier partners in the hopes that they will adopt them, and we can spread our influence then on our footprint.
Now, it seems almost intuitive, but why'd you start doing this?
Because while Ford is big, we have 62 plants globally, it's not big enough to make a difference. And so by working with our supply base, we can really turbocharge our effort.
So explain how the whole process works. If I'm a supplier, how do I get involved with this?
So it's a voluntary program. We started out with 25 suppliers, and when they sign up, we provide them a list of all of our manufacturing best practices and a tool that you can use to track your progress and set targets for your company. It's been very warmly, great response from our supply base.
So when you say a tool, what's it, an app for a phone or a computer program?
It's a computer database where you can set targets, put all of your ideas from our long list that you've adopted, and then track the implementation and the savings that you get from those ideas.
Very interesting. And how do you track what the suppliers are doing, or you just leave that up to them?
We don't want to make it punitive, and we don't want to look over their shoulder. We are giving them the tools, we're giving them the ideas, and in the hopes that they adopt as many as they can.
Very interesting. So what's been the supplier response to this?
Response has been great. We've grown since we've introduced it in 2015. We started with 25 suppliers, and that covered 800 sites in 41 countries. So you can see from our 62 sites to 800, big magnifying effect. Now last year we expanded even further, and we've got about 24 additional suppliers that have expressed willingness to join us.
Fascinating. Give us some examples of what you've achieved or what they are doing.
Again, the 4 areas that we're looking at are energy use, fresh water use, solid waste reduction, and air pollution and CO2. And so we've got literally thousands of ideas in the database that we share. And obviously, some of them are easier to do than others. Some are immediate payback and are cost reductions, and others are when you get down the chain, a little bit harder to do. But these are ideas that not only benefit the environment, but they reduce the cost of manufacturing. And so from a Ford's perspective, we don't want to keep these ideas secret. If our suppliers can lower their cost of production, it's good for everybody.
Were there any specific instances or examples that you thought, wow, what a great idea, or are they just taking all of Ford's ideas that it's sharing?
Right now, they're taking all of Ford's ideas, but I can envision that in the future, we're all sharing in a network. They may have ideas that we're not aware of that they should share back. So it's an interesting concept.
How did this all come about? I mean, where'd you come up with the idea for this?
It actually started in the base of our organization by just one of our analysts who thought it was a good idea, came up with the name, came up with a logo, and sold it first within Ford, and it was just too good to resist. So we started a pilot in 2014. The supply base, very warm response, as I said, and it's just grown.
You must have learned things as you've gone along. Is there anything new for this year that you're starting to incorporate in the PACE program?
Yeah, when we first started, we focused on energy use and fresh water use, which is becoming a big issue, especially in some countries. It's fresh water availability is becoming a human rights issue. Our recent expansion has added solid waste and CO2 air pollution. So we keep adding categories, and we keep refining the tool based on feedback from the suppliers, making it easier to use.
What's the next steps then? Where do you think you have to take this?
The next step is to make it a little sexier. We're working on some TED Talk style videos to accompany some of the good ideas, interviewing our manufacturing team in the plants to try to explain the ideas further. An Excel spreadsheet only gets you so far. But I think to generate interest and to explain the ideas, we need a little bit fresher marketing approach. So that's what we're doing right now, John.
Very interesting. Clearly, I got to learn even more about this. Hey, as long as I've got you, and you handle indirect purchasing, there's a lot of talk on the tooling side of the business of bottlenecks and a real critical shortage because there are not as many tooling companies, certainly in the U.S., than there used to be. Are you running into that? And if so, how are you overcoming it?
In certain categories, yes. Especially in the injection molding space, there's a capacity issue, and there's a skill shortage. There's just not a lot of young people going into the trades, and so we're working with our tool suppliers to encourage more young people to do internships at the tool shops, and it's a good industry and it's a good living, and I just think it's an unknown quantity right now.
Are you doing anything within the company to get a younger generation into that side of the business?
Not within Ford, it's mostly through the supply base, John.
Yeah, very interesting. What else? What else can you bring us up to speed with, or you would like to share with our audience?
Well, just that PACE is just one part of our supply chain sustainability effort, and it has to do with environmental reduction or improvement at our supply base. But there's a lot of other things that Ford's engaged in. In the same group, they're also working on human rights, working conditions, how our suppliers hire their people. We do a lot of audits, and so we're really trying to improve our responsibility to the planet by making sure all of our suppliers are responsible. And part of our outreach is to make sure they're working with their suppliers. So we hope it's a multiplying effect on what Ford is driving as a best practice.
I commend the company for doing it, but that can be a bit of a sticky wicket, right? Because in certain cultures, what we might consider a violation of human rights is just the way things get done in the country.
That's true, and we are encountering that. However, for people that want to do business with Ford Motor Company, we have minimum standards, and so those standards are very clear when you sign up to do business with Ford.
Good. Well, good for pushing along those ways, and I like the answers that you're giving in that regard. Greg Hamel, thanks so much for giving us a quick update on the indirect side of purchasing, and especially with your PACE Awards.
Thank you, John.
Very good.
Okay.
Over here, kids. You, here. In you go. Thank you. Show traffic.
Life is a sport. We are the utility. The unstoppable.
At Denso, we make, create, innovate. We're pushing the limits of technology. Creating a world where technology improves lives, saves lives. What does your future look like? Join our team of innovators.
We're back for the Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the floor of the Detroit Auto Show in the Ford display. This amazingly gigantic, multimedia, brilliant color kind of display that they've got here. We're so thankful that we've got an excellent position here. This panel was organized by the Center for Automotive Research, and I got to tell you who we've got on here because it's really good. Jay Barron, the president for the Center for Automotive Research. Sandra McClelland, she's the Sales Development Manager for Solvay Specialty Products, and MaryAnn Wright, who's the Group Vice President for Technology and Industry Relations at JCI, Johnson Controls. I want to thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gee, you wanted this panel to be titled Beyond 2025.
I did, yes.
And so explain your reasoning and what you think this discussion should be about.
Which is also what led me to invite the two ladies. Sandra, very competent, extremely knowledgeable of advanced materials, which is one of our technologies going forward. And of course MaryAnn, which has electrification, mobility, strong in a number of areas. So I've brought them along to help with the hard questions. But with the problem that we have, I think, in the industry, we're looking at, everybody keeps talking about 54.5 by 2025. And nobody that I know of thinks that that's going to go away. And that's CAFE, that's reading fuel economy. In addition to that, there's other regulations that aren't bantered about quite as much, but are more challenging for the auto companies. And this is the EPA's emissions reduction goals, which are just under 5% a year out to 2025. They want to continue for 5% a year past 2025. And so we broadly think that the technologies that get us there to 2025 are different than the technologies that might get us to 2030 or 2035. And if you're not a multinational company with a lot of technology deployment, I don't quite know how they're going to plan. You got to live in the short term to get to the long term. So it's challenging for the industry, and that's the fuel economy regulation. We haven't even talked about ARB and the ZEV mandate, which is another challenging story, especially with low gas prices and getting more ZEVs on the road. And then the other technology that I think is fascinating is mobility and connectivity and autonomous driving. The difference between that and the other technologies is mobility and connectivity, that's consumer driven. Consumers are demanding that. They want safer vehicles. They love the features that come with that technology in the car. It's going to change business models. That's happening as we see here at the auto show here today. But in the auto industry will respond to that very well. As they slowly pick up the development process of cars to match the development process of electronics, we'll eventually kind of close that gap and try to keep cars current. But it's the fuel economy regulations and the emissions and the ZEV mandates really seem to be challenging, and I think that's a field that both of these ladies have some input on.
Okay, let's turn to Sandra then. You know, lightweighting plays to your strength, and lightweighting is going to play a critical role in everything that Jay just talked about.
That's correct. You know, lightweighting is the goal. Lightweighting is the enabler to get to the 54.5 and beyond. If we can lightweight more of the vehicles, then you pull more weight out, your mile per gallon improve. So plastics and polymer composites are great at that, but you're not going to do it with them alone. It takes a multi-material approach. It takes all of the materials in the best application. A good example here in the Ford area is the Ford GT. That car has an aluminum subframe and the body is composite body panels. That car is beautiful, aerodynamic as you see by the racing of it, and you know, it couldn't be done with metals on the body panels. Those body panels need to be the polymer composites. So when you have the combination of the two, you know, you are really work very well.
Sandra, you know, we see a lot of collaboration within the plastic side of the business and a lot of collaboration on the steel side of the business. What about the two getting together and co-developing these mixed material approaches? Do you think that could be done?
Well, I think one of the things that is happening is bonding together between steel and the plastics and polymer composites and aluminum. This is a real issue, is putting these materials together. How do you combine the materials? You have to have a system that bonds them together, actually joins the multi-materials. There's a number of people working on this, including Michigan State University, who's working on a reversible bonding technique. Center for Automotive Research is also looking at bonding. So a number of people are looking at how do we put these multi-materials together in a vehicle. And I think that's the next real challenge, is how do we assemble them into a vehicle.
Okay, and we'll get back into more details with Jay on that, but we got to get MaryAnn involved in this discussion of going beyond 2025. You've been on my other shows, Autoline This Week and Autoline After Hours, talking about 48-volt hybrids as a key enabler to get to that 2025 goal. What about beyond 2025, MaryAnn?
So I think similar to what Sandra's saying and Jay, this is going to be a system approach, and there's going to be lots of solutions. And fuel economy and emissions are a real piece of it. The mobility is also going to be a big contributor to reducing emissions and fuel economy, because you're going to be smarter about how you're managing the fleet. So when you think about 48 volt, it's not necessarily tied just to powertrain applications. It's really enabling other technologies that allow you to make the entire vehicle more efficient. So you can electrify components, get weight out, get more package space to do other things. You can use a higher voltage power net to enable things like autonomous driving features. So for instance, when you're thinking about things like automatic parking, you need a system with higher power that can actually make the inputs that a hand can do that a 12 volt simply can't do. 48 volt could be a bridging technology, or it could be a technology that we're going to find is going to have a long road ahead of it.
It's interesting what you're saying, because there's a lot of expectation in certain circles that everything's going to go pure electric. And if you can enable with the technologies you're talking about, like 48 volt, to make piston engines cleaner, they're probably going to be around a lot longer than a lot of people realize.
Oh, absolutely. And you and I have spoken about this a lot. I mean, the internal combustion engine still has a long runway. They continue to get more efficient, cleaner, and with other systems supporting the overall efficiency, it further extends the traditional combustion engine, and diesel by the way, and further challenging electrification. Listen, electric vehicles, plug-ins, they have a role, but they're going to continue to be a niche in absence of really enforceable kinds of regulations. They're going to be a niche because there's going to be a lot of other things that the automakers can do and the suppliers to drive technologies that the customers are willing to pay for, drive, and love.
Along those lines, John, I think we used to do studies 15, 20 years ago. We called it low volume manufacturing. And that was like something under 50,000 units was considered low volume. Low volume is getting lower and lower. And I think along the lines of what MaryAnn's saying, we're going to see a lot more niche markets for technology, for vehicles that match the use in the market that it's in. Whether it's in the city, whether it's going on a long distance on a highway, whether it's towing something. We can't keep driving around in large SUVs if all we're doing is dropping the kids off at school. So I think you're going to see more customization, more model mix. Auto companies are getting much more efficient at making lower volume vehicles profitably. That's another trend.
Yeah, Sandra, sticking on this idea of conventional technology, how far can we go with the composites that we have right now?
I think plastics and polymer composites have a really far way to go and more added stuff that we can do. Right now, composites are expanding, they're growing. There's new materials coming into composites. We're going from thermoset composites to investigation in thermoplastic composites, which allow different properties. They also allow better recyclability. So, that's important in our marketplace. Additionally, when we talk about autonomous vehicles and other vehicle technologies that are coming down the road, plastics and polymer composites are an enabler to autonomous vehicles. One of the things is you're going to add additional things into an autonomous vehicle in order for the autonomous vehicle to park, have sensors, have cameras, all of this. You need to lightweight the whole vehicle in order to make it work. Your interior is going to be different. All of a sudden you're going to have seats that form and face each other. We're going to have a conversation, maybe a coffee table in the middle, or maybe today I don't want to talk to you so we can turn the seat around and face it the other direction. It's going to be very different. Maybe I want my dash to be my workspace and I want a barrier there so I don't listen to MaryAnn while I'm working or talking on the phone. All of this can be achieved with plastics and polymer composites on the interior of the vehicle.
Jay, sticking with this idea of using conventional technology to go beyond 2025, what are your thoughts on fuels? Because piston engines don't create carbon, it's the carbon in the fuel that creates the problem. And it would seem to me if you could decarbonize, and the EPA's even talked about that,
right.
Boy, you could maybe take a piston engine and match the carbon footprint of an electric car.
As you know, there's work being done on that. And even with a ethanol-based fuel, you're getting some of the carbon out of there as well, while raising the octane level of the car. So no, I think flex fuels will continue to grow. We've got to motivate the industry to go that way. Right now, I go by the gas station and the E85 is maybe 10 cents less than regular fuel, and you're going to compromise fuel economy with it. So that part of the infrastructure is going to be an issue there to get that out. So,
yeah. What are your thoughts on that, MaryAnn? Having decarbonized fuel, is that anything that you use in your calculations as to where powertrains are going?
To be honest with you, no, we haven't. However, it's one of the equations. I mean, we're not working on it at Johnson Controls, but it is part of the equation relative to how do you get to that zero emission footprint. And I think things like that, Argonne National Laboratory is doing a lot of work in this area. Yeah. And I think it's going to be key, because if you can continue to wring out those assets, billions of dollars of assets that the OEMs and the tiers have in place, it's just going to be better for the consumer. And oh, by the way, there's another piece to this, and that's called safety, infotainment, and those are kinds of those are regulations and trends that are going to drive new technologies and new features and functions for the customer that go beyond anything on the regulatory. The whole notion of your car being connected to your house, the car being connected to your office. There are so many things that the OEMs have levers to pull and technologies to drive demand and adoption that go way beyond anything that we can do inside of the powertrain.
Yeah, and I think from the safety perspective, safety is a real concern with autonomous vehicles. It's a concern with regular vehicles here today, but plastics and polymer composites actually improve the safety of a car, because when you're in an impact, your goal is to transfer the energy to somebody other than the occupant or pedestrian. Plastics and polymer composites can do that. They transfer, when you're in impact, the impact transfers its energy to the plastic and polymer composite, thus not transferring the energy as much to the pedestrian. So the crumple zone becomes designed slightly differently, and you get better safety. It's a great thing.
You know, John, one of the things that I think we haven't talked about here, which a problem that we are all confronted with, is talent. You know, cars are getting more complicated. That's what you're hearing from all of this discussion. And I think there's a severe shortage of engineering talent in probably global, but certainly in the US, that is going to constrain our ability to develop these technologies. It's one thing to say that we can prove something works. It's another thing to be able to make thousands of these a month and get it out there. But I think engineering talent, work skills, this is a serious problem in our industry, and without question, cars are far more complicated today. You talk about mixed materials, well, you got hundreds of materials in that vehicle. It's not all mild steel anymore, and all these different joining technologies, never mind the electronics and consumer aspect of this. So a wonderful opportunity, it's a great time to be an engineer. Engineer, supply chain, work skills, severe shortage that has to be addressed sooner or later.
So if I could, John, so you're absolutely right, and I think it's going to be particularly critical here in the United States. We are going to, I think I saw something to the tune of 20 to 30 million engineers short. I mean, that's a huge gap.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen in other countries. But taking it on the positive side, if you look at the small startup technology companies that are seeing such an opportunity to participate in what we'll call automotive and mobility, it's really inspiring to see all the opportunities that are out there to really drive new technologies. And I think it's done a couple of things to the traditional OEMs, and that is we've become operating with more of a sense of urgency. And we're operating with more of a sense of a real mindset of the consumer and what the consumer really needs and wants inside of their vehicle. So I think it's really exciting to see all of these new companies come in and want to participate in a space that for 100 years has really been the environment of very entrenched, long-standing companies that have long product cycles, long development cycles, and they're challenging some of those.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you know, part of the problem in attracting a new generation to the industry is so many people's perception is still like the old Rouge plant, you know, dirty, dangerous. And now as you get into these mobility services, autonomous cars, there's an excitement. There's a new generation that's becoming more interested. But I'll tell you, just to your point, Jay, of how acute this talent shortage is, there's several suppliers who have got exhibits on the floor here of the Detroit show. During the public days, these are the industry days, during the public days they're actually going to be recruiting. And not just for engineers, by the way.
Yeah.
Also for skilled trades. They're even looking for co-op and internships, and they're putting the word out. Come on down to the auto show, look at the new cars, and apply for a new job, which I think is amazing.
You know, Joe, at CAR, just to put in a plug, we have a conference we're doing in April in Grand Rapids called T3, Tooling, Technology, and Talent. And we were contacted by the auto companies saying, we are afraid that we do not have enough work skills in the industry to help us launch all the new products that are coming out. And this is going to be a serious issue coming upon us quickly. So we're trying to help address that, but this clearly is going to be a constraint to the technology development going forward past 2025.
Well, at the American Chemistry Council, where I'm a chair for the auto team, one of the things that we do every year is we sponsor a program at the College for Creative Studies. I don't know if you've seen the models out in the lobby of Kobo,
Yes.
but these kids are great. What we're doing is we're training them to use plastics and polymer composites in their designs. They get so involved in this that, you know, they want to use plastics and polymer composites, they want to design, they want to move into the automotive industry. This is very much like what Jay is talking about. We have to educate people so that they can move forward in the automotive industry.
What an interesting conversation. You know, we start out talking about beyond 2025, what are the regulations going to be, what are the technologies going to be, and we end up talking about, but we have to have the talent to get us there.
Yes.
So very interesting, and that's a recurring theme that we're hearing, not just at this show, but at so many others.
Yeah.
Hey, look, we've got to wrap this up. I want to thank all three of you. Very interesting conversation, and I'm sure we'll get beyond 2025,
I expect to.
but there's some work to get there. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
You guys are great. You make my job
kids. You, here. In you go. Thank you. Show traffic.
Life is a sport. We are the utility. The unstoppable.
Bridgestone engineers are helping All-Pro receiver Larry Fitzgerald go long.
I don't need help going long.
Bridgestone's Dual Lenza Plus is our longest lasting SUV and truck tire. It's engineered to go 80,000 miles.
Huh?
It's over 14 million first downs.
Oh, dang. I love anything that goes long. Long hair, long passes, long careers.
Long division.
Long dogs.
We're gonna do this for 80,000 miles?
You can walk if you like.
I don't want to walk there.
You don't have to. Yes. Long hugs, long weekends.
At Denso, we make, create, innovate. We're pushing the limits of technology. Creating a world where technology improves lives, saves lives. What does your future look like? Join our team of innovators.
Welcome back to the Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the floor of the 2017 Detroit Auto Show at the magnificent Ford display. I know those of you who have been watching have heard me describe this thing as just amazing. It's a multimedia extravaganza. This next panel that we're going to have right now was organized by the Consul General of Japan. And we've got a terrific lineup, including the Consul General himself, Mr. Mitsuhiro Wada, the Consul General of Japan, Doug Patton, the Executive Vice President for the Engineering Division and the Chief Technical Officer at Denso International America, and John Clark is the President of North American Sales for Aisin, and I want to thank all three of you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
John, let me start with you. One of the things that we wanted to talk about is so much R&D required in the automotive industry today. There's so much new technology coming in on so many different fronts. Aisin, of course, is heavily involved in R&D. I'm curious, how do you handle what you're doing here in the US and how do you coordinate it on a global basis?
You know, it's an interesting topic. We started out well over 15 years ago with a small R&D center in Plymouth, Michigan at the time, with the core of our technology being based out of Japan, doing more liaison work with our customers here locally. It became apparent to us very quickly that that just wasn't enough, and really the automotive market is a global market, and we needed to be able to understand what the requirements were with our customers throughout the world, and especially here in Michigan where the bulk of our customers are. So since then we've just been incrementally adding to our capabilities and growing our R&D structure right here in Michigan.
Great. And Doug, I'm sure something similar must have happened at Denso as well along those lines.
Yeah, we have a similar story. Denso has 7 tech centers around the world, so we try to go to where the technology is growing the fastest, are the most rapid. I mean, HMI is something that's maybe more North American based than the rest of the world, so we've concentrated a lot of HMI activity here. Artificial intelligence, we just announced agreement with U of M to have a lab out there based on artificial intelligence. So things that are here that we can operate on and bring to the rest of the world, not just back to Japan, but to the rest of the world.
Doug, that's very interesting. Why would HMI be more of an important consumer requirement in the US than elsewhere?
I'm not sure I can answer the question why, but I mean, if you think about kids in video games, that's an HMI connection, right? So there's a certain amount of understanding and demand for that here in North America. So it has been proved to be a good place to do that kind of research.
Yeah. Wada-san, it's very interesting to hear 2 Americans working at 2 Japanese companies that are now doing more research in the United States. Tell us a little bit about how you see the importance of Japan and America collaborating in research and what is being done in this area.
Well, thank you for your questions. And well, Japan and US are the major players in the auto industry, and I think that the 2 countries should take lead in development of the auto industry. And Japan and US has been working very closely in development of the new technologies and so forth. And OEMs and suppliers have been working together to make the auto industry more developed. And recently, R&D trends towards the autonomous vehicles and new technologies. And the US, Michigan is the leading place for development. Many Japanese companies are very much interested in having R&D facilities here in Michigan. And I think so Michigan is a very good place for them to work together.
What kind of investment have Japanese companies made in Michigan or even in the Midwestern part of the United States?
What kind of
investment?
Well,
how much money have they invested in this area?
Well, according to the money, I don't know, but the Japanese companies have been contributed a lot, greatly, to the U.S. economy in auto industry. As I understand that OEMs and suppliers jointly provide 730,000 jobs, direct jobs and spin-off jobs in the whole country. And according to our survey, the Japanese company in Michigan provide 28,000 jobs, and in Ohio, 55,000 jobs. So it's a very impressive number. And not only providing employment, the Japanese companies have been made a huge contribution in helping U.S. manufacturers. For example, the concepts such as Kaizen, constant improvement, or monozukuri, the way of manufacturing things, and Toyota production system. Those ideas, concepts, have had a huge impact on American manufacturers themselves. So not only the economic impact, but also creating the new way of thinking. Japanese companies have been making a good contribution to American manufacturing.
Doug, I thought you were going to add something there.
Yeah, if you want some numbers, I don't have a Michigan number, but in the U.S. in the last 4 years, we've invested $1.2 billion and created 4,200 new jobs in those 4 years. And we continue to see more investment and more jobs coming here to North America.
John, you mentioned how Aisin is moving more R&D here. How do you determine, Doug mentioned a couple of examples, HMI and artificial intelligence. How does Aisin determine what R&D it will do here so you're not duplicating what's going on at your other places?
One of the things that we do is, well, first of all, we listen to our customer to try and understand, what their future needs may be. But within our own planning, as we're looking at the market and trying to determine the direction that it's going, we're trying to place the people in the area where they're going to be most needed. And I have an example of an area. In 2003, Aisin launched the world's first completely autonomous parking system. And we've been working at growing that and evolving that system. But for years and years, a lot of the idea was, you don't need self-parking in the United States. You've got plenty of room. The parking spots are large. And in our R&D centers throughout other parts of the world thought that, that was probably the case. But by having people here and being able to give feedback globally to really understand what the needs are, we've been able to really put the emphasis, again, on those types of technologies. And as you can see here at the auto show, autonomous everything is where it's at. So it's not only limited to such specific things like only parking and the size of the spots. It really grows into something much larger. And so we've been trying to broaden our view of what really the future is, and then bringing in the resources necessary to push that forward as much as possible.
Doug, you mentioned artificial intelligence and that you're doing it in Ann Arbor. Toyota, of course, too, has got a major artificial intelligence push on in the U.S., Ann Arbor being part of it. What's this interest so all of a sudden in AI, and why did Denso decide to do it in Ann Arbor?
Well, AI is an important piece as we move toward completely autonomous driving. And autonomous drive is by your definition, right? It's a very wide variety. My definition is sleeping in the back seat. Okay, if I get to sleep in the back seat, I want to make sure I have some artificial intelligence help making sure I'm okay. All right, but we have a good relationship with U of M. We've done research there. MTC is right there. It's like right in the backyard of where this activity is. They have the right kind of professors, the right kind of students. So it's a great place to bring everything together, and it's 30 minutes away from our office. So it has all the right pieces.
Yeah, why not in Japan though? Why did Denso decide to do this work in Ann Arbor?
So I think it doesn't, in this case, it won't be exclusively done in Ann Arbor. There'll be some done in Japan, but we work very hard, as you were asking John, to how do we segment this? How do we not duplicate that work? And so we sort of carve out, this is your area, this is your area, this is your area. We spend a lot of time trying to make sure that we don't duplicate it. And sometimes if it's a different method, maybe that's okay to duplicate, right? But not duplicate the same kind of methods.
How do you both make sure, you say you carve out this area, carve out that. Sounds easy, right? There's got to be all kinds of overlap, and others saying, no, I want that. John, I'll start with you. How do you resolve that? Or that's just something that you fight out constantly?
It's one of those things where the group, I think that just nature solves that problem, and that the different groups through communication, have to really resolve that. There's always going to be some level of overlap, because if you don't have that overlap, you then again segment things, and you end up doing the reverse of globalization of the technology, and you have the opposite problem where you're not communicating very well. So really for us, it's just a matter of communicating well. And thankfully in this day and age, communication is a lot easier than it used to be.
Right.
John's right, communication is the key. And we will always have our own differences of opinion as we go through this. But we just have to go through step by step and evaluate each one of the opportunities and communicate and make some decisions. They're not easy decisions. We don't like some of the decisions, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, good point. Wada-san, there's a tremendous amount of interest in this research in artificial intelligence. As I mentioned, Toyota has put most of its research effort in the United States. Honda, on the other hand, has put most of its research effort in Japan. How do you, especially as a Consul General, how can you help both the US and Japan collaborate together in advancing this kind of research? What kind of policies or ideas do you have in those regards?
Well, actually, it's up to individual company to choose where they should do research and development. So as far as government is concerned, we don't have any specific position on this. But many local government in Japan, they are also very much interested in attracting those new industry into their territory, as state of Michigan does in here. And in fact, they dispatched the delegation here to learn how Michigan is attracting investment, automotive investment, especially R&D, autonomous driving R&D in the state. So there are a lot of movement also in Japan and in the United States. In any case, it is really necessary for US and Japan work together to do work together to develop this new technology. And as a Consul General of Japan, I'm really willing to help others to strengthen their partnership. Recently, I heard that the Honda announced that they are going to launch a partnership with Waymo, Google. So many things are happening, and I'm looking forward to see a lot of new news coming in the coming months.
Very good. Doug, of course, one of the recurring themes in any conference these days is the talent shortage. As you guys look to do R&D around the world and the like, is this something that you're finding outside of the U.S. as well? I'm very familiar with the issue here in the U.S. You finding that problem elsewhere in the world?
There's a talent shortage everywhere. There are some places where there is more talent than others, but U.S. and Europe are both places where there's talent shortages. China, India, maybe a little bit less so, but still talent is key. Actually, this year we're using our booth here at the show to recruit. So next week we're going to have a recruiting event at the show to try to bring talent into Denso.
Which I think is a brilliant idea. I've never heard of anybody using an auto show during the public days as a recruitment tool. I think that's fascinating. John, same question to you. You know, are you guys running into a talent shortage, and how are you handling that, or are you?
We certainly are. I think everybody, as Doug said, is feeling a pinch on talent, but I also want to believe that there isn't a talent shortage and that really the talent is there. And the key is how to help take our industry, the automotive industry, and get it back into the mainstream so that the talent that is there wants to be part of this industry and not some other industry. Part of me really wants to feel that the talent really is there. And I understand that just purely the numbers show that there is a shortage, but I think if we can help regenerate the interest, this is the most incredible industry. It's fun, it's exciting. And somewhere along the way, maybe that got lost a little bit, but I don't personally feel that that's the case. And so I'd like to think that NIAS is a good opportunity to remind everybody just how exciting this industry is. For us in North America, you can't survive without a car, at least for the majority of us. And to remember how important the automobile is for us in our lives, and then pull the talent back in because of that.
You know, I like what you're saying, that the talent's out there. Maybe the industry's just not attracting enough of it. But I think too, as we move into this brave new world of ride sharing, mobility services, autonomous cars, electrification, there's a younger generation that's getting a lot more excited about that kind of technology. And maybe we'll start looking at Detroit and other automotive centers as well. And of course, as you guys know, and you're doing, a lot more collaboration between the traditional automotive industry and the tech industry than I've ever seen in my career. So I think we might be on the way. So I appreciate what you said there. Look, with that, we're going to have to wrap it up. I want to thank all three of you. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we're wrapping up the 2017 Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you from the floor of the Detroit Auto Show, based right here in the center of the Ford Motor Company display. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you missed some of our other ones, they're on our website right now, only a click away. But John McElroy signing off. Thank you so much for having tuned in. Good job, guys. Very good.
The Autoline Supplier Symposium is brought to you by our signature sponsor, Ford Motor Company, and also by Bridgestone, Continental, Denso, and the MEDC.